Welcome to another exciting episode of Humanity 8.0, a podcast where we talk about our post-truth present and our transhuman future, with the aim of sketching out the outlines of what awaits us in the years and the decades ahead of us. This podcast is brought to you by Rokos. Companies with limited IT budgets and personnel can now get the same cybersecurity protection as big enterprises. Rokos' Secure Access Service Edge, SASE solution, with zero trust, provides enterprise-grade comprehensive cybersecurity so that you can focus on your business. For more, please visit www.rokos.com. That's ROQOS.com. And now, here's your host, Dr. Ahmed Bouzid, founder and CEO of Witlingo.
Tell me, give me, the point I'm trying to get at is, who is your opposition at high level, Democrats or Republicans, and are most of the states one blue or red in the mix?
Most of the states that have joined so far are blue states. They are states that are, have more Democrats. Overall, this has become more politicized since the 2016 election. Even though it's a nonpartisan issue, it's that perception we have to get past. Even if a Republican legislator understands our argument, that doesn't mean that their voters are not going to be very upset if they vote for this bill, right? And so we are seeing more support from Democrats. Our bill in Minnesota has been introduced with bipartisan introduction, but we don't have as many sponsors as we had before the 2016 election that are Republicans. So for Michigan and Minnesota, it's not a secret that we're most hopeful for passing those bills now because they just became Democratic trifectas. And in the last few years, we need Democrats to be in the majority for the bill to get passed. In Michigan, for example, we had 15 Republicans and 10 Democratic senators, so 25 total, out of a chamber with 38 senators signed on, so more than enough votes to pass. Sponsors of our bill in 2018, so after the divergent election in 16. But leadership didn't like our bill, so it went nowhere. So even if you get a lot of people from both sides to support it, you really need people at the top level to support it, and that has been more consistently Democrats in the last few years.
Yeah, I guess the framing of the high level framing of popular vote means Democrats, right? Or it means at least the record has been so far that Democrats have more votes, popular votes, right? And so I can see that definitely. What was I going to ask? So in terms of let's say you succeed in a state, and it's not definitely, it's like, say, a purple state. Okay, let's say you get to succeed in Virginia, which is more or less, it's getting to be blue, but it's still purplish, right? Let's say you succeed there. Could someone introduce a legal challenge, take you to court, say, no, this is anti-constitutional, this is something that is blah, blah, right? Just introduce a lawsuit. Can somebody sue your success? Like the legislature passed it, but the state constitution, somebody puts a case in front of them. Would that even be a possibility for them to make such an argument?
They could, but what the court would very likely rule is that they don't have standing because it isn't in effect yet. So I think that's why we haven't seen cases like this, because, it doesn't have to be a purple state. There could be Republicans in California that didn't like that they joined, but it's not in effect. And so there's that question there if they would have standing or not. So I don't think that they would. I certainly, when we get to 270, there is no question that we will be sued, and this will end up in front of the Supreme Court. Okay, that's going to happen.
So when you say, in effect, you mean you got to 270, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we have to have 270 electoral votes signed on by July 20th of a presidential election year for the bill for it to be governing for that election.
I see, and it's the same for all the states that have joined in, right? It's the same date and everything. Okay.
Same date, because it's the same 888 word bill in every state.
Okay. So You described your strategy, which I think is smart, obviously, that you're going from the bottom up, right? You're not trying to do a constitutional, which is impossible to do, and so on. Well, it feels like it anyway. And you go to the folks who are very receptive to the population, right? State legislators and so forth. And I think it seems to me that you rely on citizen participation, folks who will speak up, who will go and who will visit and who will explain that they want this and that. And I agree, right? Even, my local congressman here, national congressmen, they do listen to us when we decide to go and visit with them, because they know that when somebody complains, they are usually a stand-in for, I don't know, 20 people out there who feel the same way, but are not talking. So citizens, okay. But do you have, let's say, organizations who are natural allies of yours that join you in this effort?
Yes. So, for example, in Michigan right now, we have a coalition of 18 national and state groups that we're working with. And nationwide, some of our biggest partners, the League of Women Voters US, the ACLU, the NAACP, Common Cause, as well as, People for the American Way. We've got dozens of national organizations that have endorsed. And then when we're focusing on a state, then we go in and work to get their endorsements as well. So that's what a lot of my work is getting those state level groups to endorse, which means presenting to their members and doing, an educational event. It's sometimes meeting with their board to really walk them through it. And so that's something that takes months at a time usually. So we get all that lined up before the session begins when possible.
Yeah. And so let's say, so you said that you would present to their members, right? What would be the form? Is it like getting together in an event that's organized by their organization, and the topic is this? Just I want to visualize that kind of an event.
Yeah, so they would say we're hosting either an in-person or webinar event on national popular vote. This is a bill that's been before the legislature many times. We think it's interesting, come and hear about it. And so then usually it's, I have a slideshow that I'll walk through for most of those with the goal of leaving a lot of time for Q&A to make sure people really understand it.
Okay. Do you have like a video that just the elevator pitch for someone who's never heard of this? Let's say, for example, I totally, I'm very sympathetic to what you do, and now, I like to propagate and spread the word when it's a good word, right? When it's a good word, right? Let's say, how would I do that in, how do I network, like tweet it and so forth? Is there a video that just, here's the issue and here's why you should join?
Yeah, there's a short video on our YouTube channel, just a National Popular Vote. But certainly, if you're just an individual that says this is a good idea, you don't need to get into the mechanics like we're discussing here. It's just, it should be whoever gets the most votes wins. Every American's vote should be equal. Those are two things that most people can agree with. And really, honestly, the simple messages resonate with people because they get the fact that that's not the case for the presidential election right now.
Yeah. How would you, let me ask you this, how would you convince someone who today equates that position with Democrats strategizing to grab power, meaning somebody who is in the red state and who just believes that, just connects those dots, and there's a line and they say no and they move on. They're not receptive to listening.
If they're not receptive at all, I may not get into that discussion with them, but if they're a little bit receptive, I would say, if you're a Republican, does that mean that you think that your party and your ideas are not competitive with Democrats' ideas? Because I think that, Democrats might have good ideas and they might be able to sell it on the most amount of Americans. And if you're a Republican, shouldn't you think that about your own party? So that's kind of where I would set the foundation. But then the secondary level, Republicans are competitive where they compete. Like if you just touched on Virginia, that was a blue state for a little bit. And then Republicans flipped the governor's mansion and flipped the House in one election. And looking at the presidential elections, Donald Trump won the popular vote within the battleground states. So the 12 states that he and Hillary Clinton actually campaigned in 2016 and again in 2020 against Joe Biden, if you just look at the states where they campaigned in, he won the popular vote. So they are competitive. And in 2016, he won it in the right combination of states to win the Electoral College. And in 2020, he lost it by 22,000 votes. He was pretty close to executing that same strategy again. Yeah. So I would say that's not working for the current party. Mm-hmm. Do you really want to rely on that? Or should we just say, hey, these are my ideas, these are your ideas, whoever the most amount of Americans agree with is what we should do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, makes sense. No, I was thinking this, and I think you gave a great answer, which is when I say they are not open, meaning that they do some thinking, so they understand what you're saying, which is, the one who gets the most popular votes wins. Okay, so they say, okay, I understand that, but they in their mind they equate that because they've heard it over and over again with the blue strategy. Okay, so that aside, let me introduce this concept here. I'm not sure if I'm introducing it, but really that there is right now an anti-establishment sentiment that is very strong. And I think it's very strong both on the right and on the left, whatever establishment means to these folks, right? So for example, the MAGA people, if you want to call them that, they see a Republican establishment as much of an enemy, quote unquote, as they see, the other crowd, right? They say that's all the establishment, and they're just little variations from each other, right? And so for them, it seems to me, and I think this is the appeal of Donald Trump and so on, is anything that upends the establishment, anything that upends it in a radical way, they seem to be attracted to it. Have you thought about using the fact that you are upending the establishment as part of your positioning? Of your message, like, we are disrupting the system is not working for you, here's one way it would work, plus all the things that you just said, which is, here's the data points where actually your candidate came very close to winning because of popular vote. Are you factoring in this sort of current zeitgeist that we are in of anti-establishment, both on the left and on the right?
I would not say that's one of our primary arguments, but certainly when we're talking to groups, I'm going to talk to them and try and get it to resonate with them, whether it's, talking to an environmental group and saying, here are things that would have been different if, Al Gore had won the presidency. So we do touch on that, but it's kind of deployed when it makes sense, right? If it's going to connect with people. But overall, I mean, what it is that people don't trust the current system. They don't like the results that they're getting. They, see it as that political establishment. So what we put in front of them is, hey, I agree that your vote doesn't necessarily matter now, and I don't like that either. And I think that you should have an equal opportunity to participate.
Yeah. I'm assuming you guys position yourselves as politically neutral.
Yes. So we are nonpartisan. I work with on our national team is about 40% Republicans, 60% Democrats or independents, and our national board is co-chaired by former Senator Al Franken, who's a Democrat, and former Lieutenant Governor Michael Steele, who's a Republican.
But neither of those guys would be viewed as, as on the side of the folks who are, let's call them the MAGA folks, right? I mean, Michael Steele is now almost a Democrat.
I do not think he would agree with you on that one.
No, in terms of his talking points, so forth, they're completely focused on only one thing right now, which is this threat from the extreme right. I'm just trying to see, is there a way, right, to frame, not disingenuously but sincerely, your mission to folks who are really neither supporters of neither of these guys, Al Franken or Michael Steele, who is now the sort of figurehead of the so-called neocon establishment, blah, 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 right? How would you, I mean, if you made the effort, and I'm sure you do, obviously, right, to talk to somebody who's really wearing a hat, the MAGA hat. I know it's challenging, but is there a path to any way of getting to them? Or is it worthwhile? Perhaps, or is just too much of an obstacle right now as things stand, and maybe things will change? How would you?
No, we will always try. I mean, certainly legislators, we're going to talk to everyone, and we're always going to engage and try and get people, knowing that we might not get folks on either end of the extreme to be supportive. But as far as when it comes to the further right, I mean, on our national team, we have a former national chairman of ALEC, who is one of of our Republican lobbyists, because he saw, he was a former state senator from California, and saw the ways that it impacted him, the people that were turning out to vote for him in his district, and just up and down the fact that California was not really relevant. So certainly talking to people based on what state they're in can make a big difference. Another member of our team, he was the former chairman of the Michigan Republican Party, and saw how it could be in one election, they're very relevant, but in 2012, they dropped off the map because it was realized that the Republican candidate was not going to win in that election. So we do have those folks, across the country that are supportive of this. But overall, I mean, I think it's talking to people based their personal position. I think that is what you want to relate more to. Like, what state are you in? How is it actually impacting you now? Like, are you benefiting from the current system? Is what your goal? Like, can that still be achieved if we have a national popular vote? Where we get those more extreme candidates, again, that's something that happens during the primary process. That's not something that usually is, in the general.
Yeah. And in any case, I think any movement that succeeds will need to first take care of the low-hanging fruit, right? The resources, right? And build momentum, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I will say, I primarily do our nonpartisan and left-leaning organizing. So we have someone who does this talking directly to those Republican-leaning grassroots groups. So I believe he would have given you a better answer to that question.
No, that's what he does. Well, I guess my question has been answered by you telling me that there is somebody who's focused on a dialogue in a language and framing. Again, not being disingenuous. You just need to be able to have the vocabulary that they will be able to parse. Yeah.
Exactly. It's talking about and paying attention to the issues that are most relevant within their community and knowing that inherently. Yeah. So I have a counterpart who focuses on those right-leaning groups. And so we do approach all of our states with a truly bipartisan lens. I mean, we employ Democratic and Republican lobbyists in every state that we're actively working in, because that's how we're going to get it done. It's not a left or right issue. It's an American issue that puts voters first.
And the fact that there is someone who is actually engaged in that dialogue tells me that this is not simply a bromide that I hear all the time. It's not it's an American issue, right? But actually doing something concrete and having somebody focused on engaging these folks. And again, I see one of the things that I'm really not happy with when it comes to the left, and I consider myself to be on the left, is just this. They just will not change their vocabulary, their language, their framing at all. It's just, this is the truth. This is how it is. If you don't get it, then you are an idiot or you are a fascist, right? And I just guess it's nowhere, right? So I'm always very appreciative when I see someone who is taking the trouble and making the effort to engage with the other side, because you may not be able to win them all, but probably you would win some, right? And that's always what progress is all about, is moving the needle a little bit. So my last question to you is, currently, what are your needs, especially needle moving needs, that if this need were satisfied, you would be able to move faster? Are there process hurdles, resource hurdles? What needs do you have that if they were fulfilled, they would be able to break through a little bit faster?
Yeah, I would say for people that are probably listening to this, we do have volunteer needs that you can help us call voters in these states. I have a list of thousands and thousands of voters that we're contacting, so anyone in the US can help with that. More long-term, we want to have this in effect by the 2028 presidential election, which means we need to add 75 more electoral votes between then and now, which is going to come from a combination of 6 to 8 states, depending on how the political landscape shifts. That is going to cost tens of millions of dollars. We are at the point where, this has been a 17-year campaign where it's been between $1 and $2.5 million spent a year. And in Colorado in 2020 was the first time we were on the ballot, and that cost us $6 million to win. So we are at this endpoint where we need to have more of an acceleration, and that's going to take a lot more resources. So more awareness about this that people have, the better, so that we can get more donors, particularly from foundations and larger donors that are interested in this because they believe in democracy.
Yeah. And how come these big foundations, you know, like the Omidyar Foundation and all these that are very, very lefty, how come are they engaged? Are you on their radar? They have a lot of money to give, and it seems to me today they are giving it to the wrong folks. They are giving it to folks who are just entrenching in this division, right? You know, it's just, you know, let's demonize these folks. Let's just go and entrench and then just focus on getting the vote out, you know, getting the people who are convinced out, right? In the blue states and so forth. And they're just focused on winning that way. Why would they not be receptive if they're not receptive to your message, which is, I think, far more sophisticated and strategic, you know, and probably will lead to a more healthy democracy as opposed to one that is completely right now a dichotomy between two bubbles that won't talk to each other.
Yeah. I mean, we do have some foundations that support us, but overall, I think the problem stems from the fact that it is a few years out. A lot of those foundations are consistently looking at the next election and only that election. And when you talk to them, it's, this is really important, but the midterms are coming up, or the 2024 election is coming up, and the Senate is on the line. And so because we're not, you know, 5 electoral votes away, there isn't that urgency. And frankly, that's the same thing we see with state legislators. We hear them say, we don't have to do this year. We can do this next year because we're not, you know, on the precipice of 270. And we're saying, no, this is the time to do it for a lot of reasons. We have the right combination of things to do it. We've got, you know, you've got thousands and thousands of voters calling you to do it. And why wait another year? And that just, you know, of course, also costs more resources. So I think that that's the biggest thing, is that people still view it as a little bit further away. I am personally really hopeful that we're going to get Michigan and Minnesota passed in the next 2 months here. That will put us at 220 electoral votes.
Okay.
That is a number that is a lot mentally closer to 270 than 195. So I'm hoping that we'll see a big shift in fundraising after that.
Right. I mean, my last note here is the following. Don't these folks, especially on the left, right, which is very frustrating to me, haven't they seen how something that was unthinkable, which is the overturn of Roe v. Wade, didn't happen overnight? It took decades of organizing, just tenacious. I mean, if they had said to themselves, we're very far from it, they would never have been able to do that. So, I mean, whenever I talk to someone who's like saying the things that you were saying other people are saying, like, we need to focus on the tactical, I'm like, really, right? I mean, you have not learned from how the other folks, who are actually a minority, the majority of people, I don't know, 80% support women's right, maybe 90%, right? And yet they were able to accomplish the impossible by dint of pure strategic thinking and tenacity, in my opinion, and money, of course, right? That saw that, let's start in the 70s. And in 2022, was it 2022 that it was overwritten, right? It was in June, right? 2022. Yes. And so it took so long, but they were deliberately strategic, right? And for me, I always give that example when somebody says, well, let's just wait, right? Because right now we have concerns to put out this fire. Why don't you let this fire burn? Who cares about this little fire? But focus on the long term, because you might win. Do you see, and there are other examples, it's not the only one, where they won because they being the minority, because they were strategic. I would, if I were you, I would throw that bomb at them and say, guys, look at this, right? Let's emulate these folks. Let's learn from them. What do you think?
Yeah, that is a point that is helpful with some people, also pointing to the ERA campaign and how close they got to making that happen. I point to the Virginia example that I literally had senators say to me, we'll get to this next session. And next session was then not on the table because they lost elections.
Because they lost.
Because Democrats lost the House and the governor's mansion. So we do point to that. So we try and use that. But I mean, overall, I would say as an individual, I certainly think that the Republican Party is better at looking more strategically and long term. And overall, that Democrats are often looking more at like what's happening right now, which is why I love working on this issue so much. It is a structural reform that is going to set the landscape for fixing a lot of other things in our democracy. And it is taking that long-term lens. It's what is the most impactful thing that I could be working on. And personally, I think it's this.
Yeah, no, I totally agree that folks like you and the work that you do is really, really important, even though people can't see the light yet. But the light will happen. That's how big movements, nobody takes them seriously until big momentum. And as you said, once you get to 20, 230 or 20, all of a sudden 220, all of a sudden it's something possible, and everybody sees the light. Everybody now starts to rally because they can see a win. Eileen, Reevey, thank you so much for spending the hour. It's been very enlightening and educational to me. Hopefully, I'm sure actually for my audience as well. I'm gonna be following what you do very closely. I hope everybody else will. Offline, if you can share any links with me that I can include them in the show notes, that'd be fantastic. But do you have any parting thoughts for the audience in terms of motivating them to go and do?
Yeah. So if you are in a state that hasn't joined this yet, I would say please contact your state legislator. You can go to our website, it's nationalpopularvote.com, and contact them right away. This is something that you can make a real difference on. This is the only thing that we can change at the federal election or federal level when it comes to voting that you can advocate for at the state level. And it is a lot more accessible to get to those state legislators. So your voice really has an impact, and we really need those voices to get it over the finish line. So I encourage people to get involved and certainly talk to your friends and family about this, because the more people are aware of it, the more momentum we'll gain. So lots of information is on our website at nationalpopularvote.com. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and all of your listeners.
Thank you so much. I live in Virginia, so I'll lead by example, and I will go and do and learn how to do it, and hopefully share my learnings and rally folks along with me. Thank you again, Eileen. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Humanity 8.0 with your host, Dr. Ahmed Bouzid, founder and CEO of Witlingo. Brought to you by Rokos. Thanks for listening.